All right, dude. Honor and privilege. Welcome to the show. I just want to say thank you for joining me. A fellow nerd of the barbell. It's always like super nice for me to be surrounded by people who just geek out about the barbell,
Mm.
and training and fitness and all that. So I just want to say thank you for joining.
Well, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Mate, let's jump in. What do you do and why do you do it? More importantly.
Yeah, so I do a few things. I got into the industry almost 15 years ago at this point, a little over 15 years ago actually. And I've been a personal trainer. I've worked in the gym pop realm and serviced 20,000 plus sessions in that realm as a pretty high producer in New York City. And then I got into leadership and education development and management and went on to work at various levels of management, from facility management into being a regional manager and a national director for various companies here in the US. And then over the last 5 years, I've started my own business and then started a second business. So now I'm I guess an entrepreneur times two. Um, yeah, and it's been a pretty wild ride, throughout that process. Got into it as a stereotypical injured college athlete,
Yeah.
who fell in love with the training process as I was rehabbing my own injuries. And I was a pre-med major, so I was a double major, biology and chemistry with a minor in physical science. Graduated with that and then my CSCS, and pretty much started working from that point on and collecting Con Ed along the way. And then 2 years ago, I went back to school to get my master's in industrial organizational psychology with a focus on leadership. So I just completed
Wow.
that master's program as well, about a year ago now. So definitely stay busy. And then I've got a family. I got a wife and two kids and two dogs, and live in the Midwest now. So very, very, again, stereotypical American. But yeah, we try to cram it all in.
Sounds like a good life, man.
No complaints, none at all.
Oh, amazing. Like, I mean, first of all, like PTing in New York City, right? That's always for me has been like a wow, that must be a mental life. Just the sheer volume of foot traffic that you would see every
Oh,
single day.
it was a wild ride, man. And so I live out in, if you're familiar with the New York area, I lived out in Brooklyn for 12 of those years, in Williamsburg, which is just across the river. But early mornings, the trains only run twice an hour. So you got 15 after and 15 till. So I had 5 o'clock sessions every day, and I would have to catch the 4:15 train to get into the city for my first session. So I mean, I was getting up at 3:15, 3:30 for the majority of my career as well. And then getting home 8:30, 9 o'clock, whatever, and training 200 plus sessions a month. And it's a grind, and it's a place where if you're willing to work, and you're good with retention, you're good at what you do, and you really make it a profession and not just a hobby from that perspective, you can be really successful. But it is the definition of a grind. Everybody talks about a grind, but um 60, 70 hour weeks by the time you get into the down hours and programming hours and everything else. I worked 7 days a week for the first at least 3 years that I was training. So I'd work Saturdays and Sundays as well, half days. Um, and finally transitioned into a more traditional 5 to 6 day a week schedule. And then when I was getting into management and development, into a more kind of 9 to 5 schedule, which kind of transitioned at the point where we had our first son. And I needed something a little more stable, just mainly so I could be at home and be the dad that I wanted to be as well. So but yeah, those early years were wild. Just I the stories are there's too many stories, but a New York City train at 4 a.m. is an interesting place, just to say the least.
Yeah, it's always funny, right? Like, I would always drive, and I'd have to drive to the gym a similar hour, right, and do the good old slog. and it's quite funny. Everybody's coming back from a night out, and you're going
Yep.
to work, right? And you're like, oh God, like, am I doing the right thing here? And you just see the states either on the train, on the street, on the buses, just waiting around. You're like, oh my, I would definitely don't want to be like that, you
Yeah.
know. That
Yeah.
does, I mean, look
It's
like you had a good time, but it doesn't look like you're having a good time, you know?
Oh yeah, it's an interesting lens to view the world through as the only sober person on the L train at 4:30 a.m. or so. It's
Yeah,
wild,
man.
but
I mean,
it was fun.
something that my mum used to say was nothing good ever happens after midnight, right?
Oh yeah, yeah,
I said,
that's
just go home, bro.
true around the world, I think for sure.
Yeah, just go home.
Now I barely see 10 o'clock, on the weekends even. So I'm not even close to that anymore. So it's great.
You and me both, man. I know there's a lot of people listening that's either not in the industry, right, which is quite ironic, or real early on, right, kind of thinking
Mm,
about it, kind of just dabbling, might have just done a cert, maybe just doing a cert.
mm.
Talk to me about those long ass days, the 3 a.m. till maybe the 10 p.m. because it sounds crazy.
Yeah, and I mean it's definitely one of those things where early on you're there, but there's a lot of downtime, right? Because you're in the gym, you're in the facility, you're talking to people, you're meeting with your manager, and you're trying to figure out what the business is about, right? Because everybody comes in passionate about training, and understanding to an extent the anatomy and physiology and the kinematics and the biomechanics of everything, and programming, whatever. But they don't teach you the business, of training at all in undergrad or in the certification process, right? So, and honestly, every environment probably has a different business strategy that's going to work as well. So it's probably good they don't teach you a singular thing. It's better to kind of learn that on the job wherever you end up working. So I would spend hours just talking to my manager at the time, trying to understand kind of what went into building a successful business, because he was a successful trainer, prior to being a manager. And then I would watch, especially this is before social media, this is, pre, I mean, at this point, pre-smartphone, right? I had a Nokia Razor, I think, at this time. And,
Beautiful.
so there wasn't a lot of, there weren't a lot of ways to learn about training outside of, on the job. So I would watch the veteran coaches in the facility that I worked in who were doing really well. And I would just watch everything they did. I would watch, that's why I was coming in at 5 a.m. before I even had clients, right? I was watching when they got in, everything to how they greeted their clients, to how they set up sessions, to how they transitioned through sessions, to how they interacted and engaged. And I would just kind of shadow them either formally or informally, all day, and try to just gain insight onto what would actually allow me to be, um, successful within the same environment with the same demographic. And I think that was super important for me. And allowed me to grow my business fairly quickly, because I just mimicked what they were doing. I was a 23-year-old kid straight out of school from the Midwest, who now found themselves in New York. And, it was definitely a fish out of water, from that perspective, and kind of lost in all phases of life. Like, just being in the city, and,
Yep.
my wife was also working extremely hard, and we were just like, it was chaos, and it was fun and it was exciting, but it was also just like, I think it was hard to get settled in and get comfortable and get familiar with that environment early on. And, so I was just trying to get as much as I could, from the people around me who were doing really well. And that allowed me to grow my business fairly quickly. And by my third month, I was, doing 150 to 160, sessions a month, and selling 20 to $30,000 of training, per month at that point. And then I just kind of grew from there. And at a point, um, yeah, that's when I got into, more of the education aspect of things as well. But I also had to rethink my own education early on. I mentioned earlier, I was a collegiate athlete, and I came out of school with the CSCS. So I was really prepared to train athletes. And, I found myself with no athletes in front of me. and had to realize really early on that it's like the things that I had learned weren't necessarily going to be the things that took me further or advanced my career. So I had to look into education bases and, different systems and different models that allowed me to help the people who were actually in front of me and serve them better rather than maybe my own self-interest, as the way that I like to train or the things that I like to do. Because I was definitely just, again, in an environment I wasn't really prepared for. It was a lot of, just very general population clients who, they were living in New York. They were super stressed. They had high profile jobs. They were very busy. They had maybe had families at home too. So they had, low training availability. So we had to make the most of their frequency and make the most of their time. And that also taught me how to be super efficient and economical with what I was doing with them on the floor and kind of the things that I was talking about with them, outside of the gym as well, just about decision making and making better choices, not the perfect choice or the right choice or the optimal choice, but just making better choices kind of as they went through their days. And um, it gave me a lot of insight, and I honest it's funny, I got to train a lot of people over the years, and a lot of my mentors actually came from clientele rather than people in the industry, people who were really good in the business realm and or just really just great genuine adult grown up parents, whatever, who really kind of helped me out along the way of growing as a professional and growing into being a parent as a professional and working professional, and then kind of seeing my career go through the various stages it went through as well. So it was fun, it was exciting.
What's the biggest thing a client has taught you?
Man, I honestly probably just general, because again, I didn't have any business. I don't think I took a single business class in my undergrad. I can't remember, maybe like economics 101 or something, but no marketing classes, no advanced business classes, definitely no like MBA or graduate level classes. But I learned the business of fitness really well just through understanding some basic comments of market evaluation, supply and demand, things like that. And really understanding kind of how to use those concepts to create a more solid structure that I could operate within. Right. And I think that's where, like, conceptually those things, they can fit any context. Right. And I kind of started looking at, how can I use these concepts that, my finance, client, or this guy who runs a hedge fund or whatever, how can I use these things to grow my business and be better within, this realm and this environment? And, so just understand, getting a better grasp. I won't say understanding, because that might insult some people who work in business on the pod, but just getting a better grasp of some basic business concepts and being able to apply those things on over. And then, we had, my wife and I, like I said, we were both from the Midwest. And obviously we were young. We didn't get to see our families a lot. And we had a client and her husband who really like took us under their wing. They rented out a floor of their place to us at one point, and they're kind of like extended family to us. And just watching them and how they operated in New York. And after living there for, I mean, 40 years, 50 years, they really kind of helped us just navigate the city and understand, have a better understanding of kind of how to manage our lifestyles, through that process, and those are definitely things that I'm forever grateful for, that had nothing to do with, the nuts and bolts of training or the X's and O's of programming, so uh, that was always fun too, to just make sure that I was getting as much as I could from all directions, just trying to be a sponge as much as possible.
Yeah, man, I think that's beautiful. Like we're hired as the quote unquote expert, right, to teach
Mhm.
and coach and navigate people through this journey. And at the end of the day, we end up learning more about life
Oh
from
yeah.
our clients, athletes, members, whatever you want to label them,
Hmm.
right? We learn so much from these individuals, and we just teach them how to friggin' air squat and lie on a buddy, lie on a hamstring curl and do some bicep
Yeah.
curls and stuff. You're like,
Yeah.
guys, really, honestly, you're the smart one in this room, not me. But
Yeah.
okay, I would like to take the payment now.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like they teach us, it teaches so much. And I love the way you said you got to be a sponge. And I think that's it, man. Just
Hmm.
become personable so you understand who the person is, right? Not just kind of
Hmm.
this like, oh, it's a CEO. I'm gonna label them as that. It's like, no, no, that
Yeah.
CEO is this person. So you
Hmm.
can dive into that. And then just be open, like keep the ears open, Like I heard one time that you're given two ears and one mouth for a reason.
Yep.
Listen double the amount of times that you talk. And that's usually a lot of coaching. Coaching is listening and then being able to adapt
Hmm.
on the fly. And I think it's a super, super privilege to be able to pay our bills that way, man.
Oh, 100%. The industry is definitely one that I think again is just, I worked as a hiring manager for a period of time as well, and would do, 3 to 5, sometimes more interviews a week, for all the gyms in this box gym chain in New York. And it's what I would tell people is like, it's not a bad deal. Like you can make really good money here and you can, meet a lot of great people and advance your career wearing sweatpants. It's not the worst thing in the world, and but you have to take it serious. You have to be a professional, when you do it, just like you would any other job, right? Just because you're not wearing a suit and tie doesn't mean you're not a professional. And I think the people who end up being very successful in this career like that's something that they learn, like you said, they can, kind of again turn off the cueing in some of the instructions sometimes, and get more feedback and listen and do those things. But they do all the little things well, as far as, they're always on time, they're always engaged with their clients, they're not looking at their phones, they're not eating food, they're not, when they're on the floor with their clients, whether they're having a conversation about, like you said, forward knee translation in a squat, or about their clients, daughter's dance recital over the weekend or whatever, they're engaged in that conversation, and they're giving feedback, and they're being an active listener throughout that process, and making sure that the session is still moving forward as it should, regardless of what the conversation might be. And I think those are the people who, can kind of, play both ends of it, right? Where they can be the instructor, but they can also be the listener.
Mm.
And most of our clients, they might not know a lot about training, but they probably know a lot about other things, right? And this is where, for me, this is a weird tangent, but I always, joke about, the discipline versus motivation conversation when coaches, talk about being disciplined to train. And it's like, well, yeah, you love training. Of
Mhm.
course you're this. I mean, meanwhile, it's like you can't balance a checkbook or manage your money or cook for yourself sometimes, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's like being disciplined in one area that you enjoy doing. That's actually just being motivated, right? And a lot of our clients who maybe struggle with the discipline of training are managing, very important jobs and families, and all these other dynamics in a very chaotic, environment,
Mhm.
as far as just managing time, outside of space. Like, this, my wife and I joke, it's like we've got, any given week, 5 to 7 practices, 2 to 3 games, between our kids that we need to manage, outside of our own work lives. We're carpooling kids all over the place. We're going to support them in the things that they do as well. And then we're also trying to be successful within our own careers and spend time with one another, and make sure that all four of us get to the dinner table, right? And there's a lot of things that go on in that realm, and I think that's something that, coaches also need to understand is, your clients might be spending 2 to 3 hours a week with you, but there's a lot of other things going on, and training might not be their priority. It's something that they obviously prioritize to the extent that they do pay you money to do it, right, and to be there. But there's so many other things going on that we also need to understand that context as
Mhm.
professionals, and be able to speak to that, and take that into account when we're speaking with them about, homework or lifestyle coherence or whatever else it might be. Just to understand that, time is usually very limited, and if it's gonna take away from something else, or something else that's family related or even work related, like that, we're probably not going to get those things done, just because it's not paying the rent, the mortgage, whatever. So our expectations also sometimes, change, from that perspective.
Mhm. I think as I think as coaches, we need to get better at setting boundaries, because
Hmm.
we usually work all hours of the day, which
Oh
isn't
yeah.
necessarily bad. I think you need to taste it and feel what it's like,
Yeah.
especially at the beginning, and especially when you're 23, 18,
Hmm.
21, you're like fresh, you're not doing anything else. The only other thing you're
Yeah.
going to be doing
It's
is
probably
drinking.
keeping you out of trouble at that point.
Exactly. It keeps you off the street, right? So you're like, you might as well just be in the gym working. even if
Yeah.
it's scrubbing toilets. But then as you kind of mature through the industry, right? Like you need to be at it. No, 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 I'm here, I'm working. Everything else kind of takes a back foot. And then I'm not there, I'm not working.
Mhm.
Work takes a back foot.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I've seen for myself as well as other people. It's been the transition. I've been like, okay, well, as you again mature through this thing,
Mm.
that it really does become more of a boundary setting practice,
Oh, yeah.
and we need to, yeah, I definitely need to get better at it because I work any hour of the day. I don't really bother. I'm not really bothered.
Yeah, it's definitely a transition, and again, that's something that we talk to in just in our education groups with a lot of young coaches. It's one of the things that we speak with them about is it's like, okay, so you work in a gym, you're there 40 to 50 hours a week, and it's like, oh, what do you do for fun? And like, oh yeah, I work out. It's like, okay, that's cool. Like working out's fun. So you do that another 10 to 12 hours a week. It's like, okay, so like who do you hang out with, outside of the gym? Like, oh, like the other trainers. It's like, okay. So you work in a gym and you work out for fun and you hang out with the other trainers. Like, do you ever spend time with people who, don't work in the industry or doing things, outside of the industry? And a lot of times, coaches like they neglect that, and they get inside this bubble, right? Where, again, there's a lot of confirmation bias, there's a lot of validation that comes within that, but they also kind of stop being like well-rounded humans. So some of the things that we talk with a lot of our people about is, like, what'd you do before like fitness became a thing? And it's like we spend time with a lot of people and like, oh yeah, like I used to write a lot, or I played an instrument, or I drew, or I painted, or whatever. It's like, well, would you like to do that again? Like once a week, right? Would you like to like do something outside of that? Like, yeah, like if I could find the time, it's like, can you make the time?
Mm.
Right? Can you spend time with people that you don't necessarily work with? Not saying those are bad people, because that's certainly not the case, but can you spend time with other people as well? And I'm fortunate because, I fall into those traps very easily because I'm very singular minded a lot of times. But like my wife's not a fitness person. She worked in fashion, so even when we were in New York, it's like we were spending time all frequently with people who had no interest in fitness whatsoever. So I was having dinners and conversations with people who were in completely other fields. And I think that was actually really beneficial for me, just to be enabling me to converse maybe better with my clients, but also just being more open-minded all around, to just everything else that might be going on in the world, and giving me a little different worldview, from that perspective sometimes. And it's definitely something that, when we work with young coaches, it is this, like, the first 2 or 3 years, like you said, and kind of like what I highlight, it's like you got to put in some serious hours to be successful. Like there's really, I haven't seen anybody be able to shortcut that very
No,
well,
me neither.
and social media has changed things a little bit, but to be successful on the floor training clients, like everyone I've ever talked to, they they worked 2 to 3 years, 6, 7 days a week, countless hours, and went through all the free consultations and free sessions and talking to people on the gym floor and marketing themselves and promoting themselves. And and it's exhausting, but I do think, kind of like you said, it gives you this perception, later on. It's like, man, if I made it through that, I can make it through this. Or it's like I can, like, I'm doing well now, and I can lay off the gas pedal a little bit. Or maybe, again, I can charge more, I can set better boundaries, I can, kind of promote other services or learn new services or whatever, and expand my business into other avenues. And I think that's something that coaches eventually, after a certain amount of time, will kind of branch into, because they realize that the longevity of 40 to 50 sessions a week is kind of low. Like there's not a long bandwidth of that, so they will kind of expand their business and learn new skills to go along with those things, and start breaking into new environments. And that's where, I'm all for that. I'm all for, coaches growing and growing themselves, along with that process too.
Yeah, for sure. You need to learn things outside of that little niche thing that we call fitness,
Yeah.
right?
No, yeah.
Like there's so much more to life, man. Get out there, learn something. and skills are transferable. They're
Oh yeah,
not
100%.
bound to the initial like environment that you learned it in. I think it's so important. And that's why I love doing this. You talk to people from all walks of life, and you're like, wow,
Mhm.
I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it's like growing up in the US. Tell me about it. Like I don't know what
Mhm.
it's like being a lady who does whatever. Tell me about it. It's I think it's fascinating. I think we can learn from everybody and everything.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to jump into leadership.
Mhm.
What does it mean to you?
I mean, so the model of leadership that I probably learned from and promoted the most is more of the servant leadership model. And more specifically, even looking at, there's a model in the psychology realm called the free range leadership model. And a lot of it has to do with taking people from a place of obligation into kind of proactive learning and growth. And even when I was working in management at the facility level, well, one of my biggest goals was to further the careers of the people that worked for me, right? Rather than just have them produce numbers or whatever and meet sales goals. Like I was really interested in saying like, hey, what do you actually want to accomplish professionally? Like, do you want to get into management? Do you want to get into leadership of your own? Do you want to open a gym someday? Like, what are your medium to long term goals? And let's put you in a position to succeed, right? Let's learn those skills. And one of the things that I did within that realm was I had 6 to 7 other gym managers promoted out from under me, over that course of time. So by the time I went into being a district manager, I was then leading a lot of those managers again, and they'd already worked with me and had become familiar with me. And one of the things that we worked through was, like let's build out mentorship programs. So let's, take the new trainers under your wing, kind of teach them the day to days, kind of have a better understanding and hold them accountable to, some of the standards that we had within the facilities, and then getting into being formal assistant managers. Let's now we can start talking about the business of fitness and what your responsibilities as a facility manager might come into, and how you can motivate and help clients and coaches kind of reach those goals, right? For the bigger goal or the team goal or whatever. And I found really early on that if I had employees that were meeting their personal goals both inside and outside of the gym, the facility goals and some of those other things just came along with it, right? And they were a very secondary action from that perspective. So I took a big step forward as far as just better, trying to understand the people who worked for me better as people, not necessarily professionally, but just especially in New York. One of my biggest things was always, we work to live, we don't live to work. And I would talk to them about their goals, and completely unrelated to fitness, like what they were trying to achieve. Were they trying to pay off student loans or move into a better apartment or buy a house or travel more in their free time or whatever, right? Or make a certain amount of money more per year. And from there, it's like once I understand those things, I can have better conversations with those people related to what was going on within the gym, right? Because at that point, money is a form of commerce. It's just a tool, right? It's like, okay, like we obviously know we get paid to train people. More sessions equals more money equals maybe a better apartment with a higher rent, right? A better quality of life for you, something closer to the gym so you're not commuting an hour in to the city every single day, like something more achievable. And when instead of having business meetings, I would talk to my staff and my employees about those things, right? And it's like, okay, if we're finding success outside of the gym, then I know the things inside of the gym are getting taken care of. Like those are things I don't need to necessarily worry about. If we're not having success with those goals outside of the gym, then we can start talking about ways that we can implement, or strategies inside of the gym that we can implement to get them there, right? And kind of further them towards that thing. So one of my big things is always, I didn't talk about their training goals or their individual revenue goals or the gym goals. I talked about the things they wanted to accomplish. And that was a proxy of sorts for those other things. I was still very successful. Got dogs. Dogs want to play bitey face over here. Um, and I still had a very successful staff, and I was national manager of the year, 2 years in a row for that company. And we broke a lot of revenue goals without ever talking about money. We just talked
Mm.
about opportunity. and the things that they wanted to accomplish and how I could help provide the tools to get them there and put them in a position to succeed outside of the gym and away from the gym, a lot of the times too. So, uh, so from a leadership perspective, it really has to do a lot with allowing other people to succeed on their own terms. I think is one of the broader definitions that I would give that to you. Because, as a leader, you obviously have goals. You have a destination that you want to get to, and you usually have a team, of course, underneath you to get there. And if all the individuals within that team are doing well and they're succeeding, the team will succeed.
Yep.
They will get to where they want to go. And I think that's an easier way to get your employees and your team to buy into the larger group, right? And create a better, and culture is a buzzword, but to create a better culture within that team as well, and make sure that everybody's aligned and on the same page, even if they are going about things differently, right? And a lot of that has to do with helping people leverage their own strengths towards their own personal goals. And again, when the individuals succeed, the team succeeds with it. And I think that's a pretty good definition of leadership from that perspective.
I couldn't agree more, man. I'm such a big advocate of looking after the people. The people come first. I think most things are a bottom up approach rather than a top down. Just create a policy and everything's just going to follow. It's like people don't do that, man. People are.
Yeah, that doesn't.
It doesn't work, man.
Yeah,
Especially in our countries that we're from, right? The UK are
yeah,
not going to follow that. No way. The US
yeah,
are not going to follow that. And it's you've got to look after the people. And
yeah,
I think that's the most important thing. Like learn them. Who are they? What are they like? What are they not like? How's their family? Have they lost a parent? Do they not have a good relationship with them? Yeah, they'll open up in time. I'm not saying that you need to extract every piece of information, personal information from them straight away, right? That happens in time, but
mm,
it's in my opinion quite simple, because
yeah,
our job is the soft skills, and everything else that kind of goes over my head at least, kind of sorts itself out, right?
yeah,
And you're like you said, the financial goals. You're like, well, hold on a minute, why are we being really successful? I was like, well, because Cal's giving a shit about me, so I'm
yeah.
gonna work damn hard for him.
And I think again, like most of the coaches, if not, I mean, I would say the majority of the coaches that worked for me over the years, it's like I just related it back to their relationships with their clients, right? It's like coaches are leaders, within that sense. And if you take the time to get to know your clients as, as people, right? Instead of algorithms, right? And understand, what's going on in their personal lives and how that influences what they're doing in the gym, and giving a shit, from that perspective, their training frequency increases, their training, just intention, across those sessions increases, and they eventually get towards those goals that you've kind of laid out and together. But a lot of it has to do with the same bottom up approach, right? It's not just a program written on a paper. Humans aren't algorithms, right? Like we can create a model, but we also have to be very flexible within that model and understand that a lot of stuff goes into that, and we can get into dynamic systems theory and all these other things that kind of, thirds, first, second, third order consequences, but nothing happens in a vacuum, from that perspective. And if somebody has things going on outside of training or outside of work, it's going to influence what's happening within those realms as well, and
For
and
sure.
what their outputs are within those realms. And as a coach or as a manager or leader or whoever, we need to be aware of those things and acknowledge those things. And that's where we can help give our support and really capitalize and utilize those soft skills that you're talking about, and just
Mm,
meet them as people rather than, as always professionals. And
mm.
I think that's super important to being successful in this realm.
For sure, man. I think that's what experience teaches, right? We can do as
Mhm.
many certs or degrees or whatever as we can conjure up, and we
Yeah.
learn so much knowledge. And I think that's awesome, right? But the soft skills is learned from the people, and that's learned
Yep.
from just getting in front of people and usually messing it up more times than getting
Oh
it right,
yeah. Yeah.
right? And
If
yeah,
if you're
learning
not
from the
cringing at your first few years, you're probably didn't grow very much, but
yeah, yeah, man.
we've all been there.
Yeah. Cal, thank you so much. This has been an honor and a pleasure, man.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. It was fun.
I mean, always, you're welcome back to talk some nonsense, talk shop. And if I'm walking around in circles in the Midwest, I'll hit you up.
There we go. There we go,
I
brother.
need to get out
I
to the
appreciate it,
States.
Alex.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Have a good day.
Likewise, you too.
All right, man. Bye, everybody.
Bye.